I just want to start by thanking everyone who decided to participate in this, whether it's strictly in support of me or whether it's in support of your own practice. I'm grateful you chose to be here. And I'll talk briefly about how the structure will go. There will be 6 of these, and then we'll do a whole nother one on another topic. So this first one is kind of just on the foundations of mindfulness as a practice. And so each class will kind of build on the next, kind of like these guys here. And the structure will be very simple. I'll just talk for a little bit about the given topic, and then we'll practice a little bit having to do with that topic and what I've shared. And then we'll close by just kind of allowing for some questions about practice and discussion on how practice is for you and that sort of thing. So in a moment, I will set an intention for this space that we're creating together and to help us enter it a little more fully before we begin. But I'll just start by inviting you to find a position that's comfortable for you. You can close your eyes or leave them open if you like. Feel free to stretch a little bit if you need to. Or you can just relax and let these words resonate. You can just take a moment to notice if you've been holding any tension, and if it's possible to relax that at all, if you can. If not, that's okay too. And just make yourself comfortable as we begin our time together. So, just taking a moment to welcome all of our different backgrounds and experiences, all walks of life, whatever we may be coming into this space with, all of our past, present, or future dreams, all our memories, all the joy as well as the heartache, the fullness of this brief experience of being human together and our interconnectedness with one another. We're here holding space for it all. And whatever we may be coming into this space with from today, or whatever might be going on in our lives at the moment, or in the lives of our loved ones, or in the world, just welcoming and holding space for it all. May it be one of healing and liberation for one and all. And you can recite these words within your mind if you like, or you can just kind of let them wash over you. May I be loving, open, and aware in this moment. If I cannot be loving, open, and aware in this moment, may I be kind. If I cannot be kind, may I be non-judgmental. And if I cannot be non-judgmental, may I not cause harm. And if I cannot not cause harm, may I cause the least amount of harm as possible. Okay, and with that, I will start with just an effort to diffuse any discomfort around the teacher-student power structure. And just to say that that's not really how I'm viewing this. It's not really how I see this at all. I'm here really as a friend and as your peer. And because I happen to think that through individual healing and awakening, we can help water the seeds for a healthier world. And so this is just, hopefully my small part in the healing process of humanity so we can cause less harm both to ourselves and to others. And so for this first class, I'll talk a little bit about mindfulness generally, and then I'll shift into the difference between attention and awareness. So these guys will serve as a little analogy throughout this course, as just kind of a model for the human being. And then I'll speak a little bit about establishing an anchor for our practice. And then we'll practice. And then we'll have some discussion time at the end of that. So the first thing I want to say is that the words that I use to convey this practice are really just a tool. Just like a raft that we would use to get off of a deserted island. We don't hang on to the raft and try to stay on it once we're free and reunited with the rest of society. You can do away with the raft at that point. And so my words are not the teacher. The real teacher will be your application of this practice in your own life. It's like Morpheus says, if there are any other Matrix fans out there, he says, "I'm trying to free your mind, but I can only show you the door. You're the one that has to walk through it." In the same way, nothing I say will change your life on its own. The real insight can only come from you seeing for yourself if it is true, by putting it to the test. So again, the real teacher here will be your application of this practice in your own life. Okay, so mindfulness, what is this? Anyone ever lost their keys or phone or something like that, and you go on a search party only to discover that they were in your pocket or in your hand the whole time? This has happened to me a lot, and it serves as a good analogy for this practice because was the search ever really necessary in the first place? Did we really need to go looking elsewhere for the thing we thought we were missing? Or was it right there the whole time and we just weren't paying sufficient attention? This is how the practice of mindfulness is. Oftentimes we're so caught up in our heads, or we have our attention distracted or stuck on something that it prevents us from seeing things how they are. We can often be lost in a thought or caught in some emotion, distracted by the story we're telling ourselves about this moment. A couple of years ago, my wife and I were driving in a car, and we pulled up to a traffic signal in the left-hand turn lane. There was one car in front of us. They were the first car in line. Then it was our car, and then there was a car behind us, and the light turned green. And just like as it happens occasionally to people, the person at the front of the line was, on their phone or something like that. And so they didn't notice the light turn green. I didn't honk or anything like that, but the car behind me laid on their horn for like at least 5 seconds. And we make it through the light and we're pulling up to the next light, and I made an intentional decision to pull up next to the car who was the one getting honked at. And I was, gonna try to acknowledge that I'm sorry that that happened to you. As I'm pulling up, she's got her hand sticking straight out towards our vehicle with the middle finger out, and she's not looking at us at all. Her arms just straight out, very, you know, like she was really upset, visibly upset. So I rolled down my car window and I'm trying to like console her, express to her that I'm sorry that happened. There's a misunderstanding. It was the vehicle behind us. I even stuck my hands out the window and gave her a little heart signal and just kept telling her, I love you. I love you. She never looked at us. She just kept sitting there with her middle finger sticking out. And it's funny, but it's a good depiction of how we oftentimes are kind of hijacked or taken over by our thoughts and emotions, and we're unable to see clearly or respond to what's happening in a wise way. For her, the thoughts and the emotions she was experiencing were real, but it clouded her ability to see reality as it is. Her attention was excluding the truth of things. And this is how most of us live our life most of the time. And I'm okay. I was okay in that moment, but there are many times where things can escalate quite quickly, and the harm caused can't be undone. Imagine if I had been someone who was in a really bad place mentally and emotionally, and seeing her flipping me off for 2 minutes straight for something I didn't even do was the last straw for me. So we practice paying attention to what is here rather than staying in the story we are telling ourselves about what is here. This is mindfulness. It consists of noticing where our attention is in an open, curious, kind, and non-judgmental way. And by including more of what's here, we encounter more spaciousness than we tend to feel when our attention is hyper-fixated on something. So it's a simple practice, but it doesn't mean that it's easy. Just like waking up from a dream that really seemed real, but all of a sudden we're awake and free from it and can barely remember it. I lost my place, give me 1 second. Or just like losing the keys or our phone and remembering we had them the whole time. It's simple, but it's not always easy. And one reason it's not easy is our society and culture works against us. It works against our well-being. It is actually set up to profit off of our discontentment. It's what keeps our consumer society running and functioning. An excerpt from the renowned psychologist and psychotherapist Ann Wilson Schaaf. She wrote a book called When Society Becomes an Addict. In a book she wrote in 1987, she says this: "The best adjusted person in modern society, this is the person who's not dead and not alive. Just numb, a zombie. If you're dead, you're not able to work for the society. But if you're fully alive, you're constantly saying no to the many unhealthy processes of society. The racism, the polluted environment, the nuclear threat, the arms race, drinking unsafe water, eating carcinogenic foods. Thus, it is in the interest of modern society to promote those things that take the edge off, that keep us busy with our fixes, that keep us slightly numbed out and zombie-like. In this way, our entire modern consumer society itself functions as an addict. And this doesn't mean just substances or sex or alcohol. It could be impulse shopping and buying, or our career, or a desire for attention and recognition or pleasure. It could also be simple things like how we maybe find ourselves standing in front of the fridge with the door open, not realizing how we got there, which has happened to me a lot. So this practice is very radically different from what our society and culture sells us and programs us to want and desire. In her Christmas song, Seven Rings, Ariana Grande captures it well. She says, "I see it, I like it, I want it, I got it." Right? Just as a side note, how's that working out for us? According to new data from the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the suicide rate in the United States recently reached its highest peak since 1941. That was the end of the Great Depression, for those of you who care to know that. Our society and culture is constantly bending our mind to this unquenchable desire to seek significance in material things, to acquire and consume, to gain fame or status or wealth, in order to get to some point in the future where we finally feel good. But it will never work, and I'll prove it to you. How many times have you gotten what you wanted? You can show hands if you like. Something you wanted, however big or small. It could be a glass of water on a hot day. It could be a pair of shoes. It could be a relationship or a job. It could be getting over an illness. And now leave your hand up only if you had that lasting sense of satisfaction from what you got. If it did, you probably wouldn't be here with me, right? This is our nature. We've been programmed for discontentment and dissatisfaction, to feel insignificant and inadequate. So this is really a radical practice for recognizing something much more essential and fundamental to this whole being human thing. Recognizing the keys were there in our hand the whole time. A PhD in neuropsychology named Rick Hansen likes to say that our minds are like Velcro for negative experiences and Teflon for positive ones. He says we suffer some misfortune, big or small, real or imagined, and in the pain or the humiliation, it sticks with us for hours, days, or even years afterward. But it doesn't have to be this way, close quote. So I'm going to shift to talking about these little guys now, and I want to talk about this greater sense of space and capacity that we all innately have, and why it can feel so difficult to access or tap into much of the time. One of my favorite teachers was a Vietnamese monk. He died a couple years ago. He spoke about our body and our mind like a house. And oftentimes we react by going after whoever or whatever we think set fire to the house instead of going to put out the fire. So not that we should just roll over and accept abuse or dysfunction in our relationships or in our lives or anything like that, but that actually in practicing in this way, we can face difficulties in our life with greater capacity and ease, able to respond wisely rather than just react however we happen to think or feel in a given moment. When we feel scared or angry or frozen, often it's better if we can respond with clarity and an inner strength and resolve rather than react in the panic of the moment. So I'm going to use these little nesting dolls as a model for a human being and to differentiate between attention and awareness. And it's kind of imperfect because obviously you can't separate any of the aspects of yourself out into smaller and smaller pieces, but just imagine the nesting dolls as all one piece, and slowly but surely we'll be moving towards awareness. With awareness being the biggest and most fundamental aspect of our being, and attention being the smallest and most cut off aspect. And one kind of playful way to notice this inherent capacity of awareness is just to close your eyes for a moment if you feel comfortable. You can also leave them open or slightly open. And just take a few deep breaths. And now just try to stop being aware. Just make any attempt to not notice anything. Okay, when you're ready, you can open your eyes if they're closed. And how did that go? Did anyone succeed in generating nothingness or oblivion? Unless we need to study you for a deeper understanding of the human brain, the answer is likely no. So we each just have this innate capacity for being conscious and aware of our experience. Attention at its most focused is like a flashlight or even a laser pointer in a dark room. It shines in one direction and focuses on one particular spot. I'm sure we've all experienced, like, you forget what you're reading or listening to or watching, and you become distracted by a thought only to have to come back and rewind or reread. Or you're driving somewhere or traveling somewhere and you kind of forget parts of the drive, or we're so zoned in on what we're doing that we don't even notice someone trying to get our attention. With attention, we don't tend to notice anything other than what our attention happens to be on in a given moment. It's exclusive. We tend to leave things out of our present moment experience, like aspects of ourselves or other people. It's a great tool to have in our toolbox, but it rarely provides us with the full picture. Like the woman at the light who could only see through the lens of her emotion and her middle finger. Attention can cut us off from reality. And awareness, or I may at times refer to it as consciousness, unlike a flashlight or a laser pointer, it's more like the sun. It's self-illuminating. It includes everything just as it is. It shines on everything in its path in all directions, always, and bears witness to things just as they are. So as an introduction to this practice, we tend to teach a bit in stages in order to provide some capacity for stabilizing this realization. For most of us, opening and recognizing awareness is a gradual process. For some, it's sudden, but if it's sudden and we have no notion of how to stabilize that recognition, then it can just set us out on the search for the keys again. And we're caught in the cycle of desire and resistance, having forgotten the keys were here with us the whole time. It's pretty hard to be mindful if our attention is really scattered. So first we learn to establish an anchor. And I have the little butts here for these guys too, but it's difficult for me to be popping them all in and out all the time, so I just left them with their top halves. But establishing an anchor is a bit like this. And that's the first step. So just like in a boat, pushed about by the wind and the waves, an anchor can help us stay grounded and rooted in the midst of it all. Perhaps you've seen a strong and mature tree in a storm, and the top of it is being blown all about by great winds. But down by the roots, what's happening? It's firm, it's firmly planted, it's sturdy, and unmoved by the storm that might be raging up at the surface. So initially, this practice is about learning our root system, establishing an anchor. Our attention can be so confined to being up in our heads at the top of the tree that we feel tossed about by life as it passes us by. And by establishing a practice of rooting and grounding ourselves, we can begin to feel more stability and presence in the midst of it all. And perhaps even sensing our root system growing deeper in the ground, capable of withstanding the strongest of storms. So we establish an anchor in our practice to help ground our attention. And at least in the beginning, this can be a lot like training a puppy. You put the puppy down and say, "Stay." Does the puppy listen? No. It gets up and runs away. You got to get the puppy, pick it up and put it back down. "Stay, puppy." And then it runs away again and again. And sometimes it jumps up or rolls around or runs over and pees in the corner or eats your underwear like my dog did, or makes some other mess. Our minds are like this little puppy, often creating even bigger messes. So we just keep a beginner's mind and begin again. St. Francis says this: "Bring yourself back to the point quite gently. And even if you do nothing the whole hour, but bring your heart back 1,000 times, though it went away every time you brought it back, your hour would be very well spent." So just to close this portion of our time together and the talk, I just want to say that this practice of mindfulness is really about inhabiting our life more fully, and by paying closer attention in a more intentional way to our life as it unfolds. We can notice the keys in our hand more and more. We can be firmly planted, not being so tossed about by the winds and waves and storms of life. It is our helper in this never-ending dance between praise and blame, pleasure and pain, gain and loss, fame or shame. And we can learn to inhabit and embody this more and more of the little time that we have here together, and leading to a life of increased well-being for both ourselves and all those who come into contact with us.